Adventure the Fifth of The Adventures of a Brownie. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Christine Blashford. The Adventures of a Brownie as Told to My Child by Miss Mulock. Adventure the Fifth. Brownie on the Ice. Winter was a grand time with the 6 little children, especially when they had frost and snow. This happened seldom enough for it to be the greatest possible treat when it did happen, and it never lasted very long, for the winters are warm in Devonshire. There was a little lake 3 fields off, which made the most splendid sliding place imaginable. No skaters went near it, it was not large enough, and besides there was nobody to skate, the neighbourhood being lonely. The lake itself looked the loneliest place imaginable. It was not very deep, not deep enough to drown a man, but it had a gravelly bottom and was always very clear. Also the trees round it grew so thick that they sheltered it completely from the wind, so when it did freeze, it generally froze as smooth as a sheet of glass. The Lake Bears was such a grand event and so rare that when it did occur, the news came at once to the farm, and the children carried it as quickly to their mother, for she had promised them that if such a thing did happen this year, it did not happen every year, lessons should be stopped entirely, and they should all go down to the lake and slide, if they liked, all day long. So one morning, just before Christmas, the eldest boy ran in with a countenance of great delight. "Mother, mother, the Lake Bears!" It was rather a compliment to call it a lake, it being only about 20 yards across and 40 long. "The lake really bears." "Who says so?" "Bill. Bill has been on it for an hour this morning, and has made us 2 such beautiful slides, he says, an upslide and a downslide. May we go to them directly?" The mother hesitated. "You promised, you know," pleaded the children. "Very well then, only be careful." "And may we slide all day long and never come home for dinner or anything?" "Yes, if you like, only Gardner must go with you and stay all day." This they did not like at all, nor when Gardner was spoken to, did he. "You bothering children, I wish you may all get a good ducking in the lake. Serve you right for making me lose a day's work just to look after you little monkeys. I've a great mind to tell your mother I won't do it." But he did not, being fond of his mistress. He was also fond of his work, but he had no notion of play. I think the saying of all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy must have been applied to him, for Gardner, whatever he had been as a boy, was certainly a dull and melancholy man. The children used to say that if he and idle Bill could have been kneaded into one and baked in the oven, a very warm oven, they would have come out rather a pleasant person. As it was, Gardner was anything but a pleasant person, above all to spend a long day with, and on the ice where one needs all one's cheerfulness and good humour to bear pinched fingers and numbed toes, and trips and tumbles and various uncomfortableness. "He'll growl at us all day long, he'll be a regular spoil-sport," lamented the children. "Oh, mother, mightn't we go alone?" "No," said the mother, and her no meant no, though she was always very kind. They argued the point no more, but started off, rather downhearted. But soon they regained their spirits, for it was a bright, clear, frosty day, the sun shining, though not enough to melt the ice, and just sufficient to lie like a thin sprinkling over the grass and turn the brown branches into white ones. The little people danced along to keep themselves warm, carrying between them a basket which held their lunch. A very harmless lunch it was, just a large brown loaf and a lump of cheese and a knife to cut it with. Tossing the basket about in their fun, they managed to tumble the knife out, and were having a search for it in the long grass when Gardner came up, grumpily enough. "To think of trusting you children with one of the table knives in a basket! What a fool cook must be! I'll tell her so, and if they're lost, she'll blame me. Give me the things." He put the knife angrily in one pocket. "Perhaps it will cut a hole in it," said one of the children, in rather a pleased tone than otherwise. Then he turned the lunch all out on the grass and crammed it in the other pocket, hiding the basket behind a hedge. "I'm sure I'll not be at the trouble of carrying it," said he, when the children cried out at this, "and you shan't carry it either, for you'll knock it about and spoil it. And as for your lunch getting warm in my pocket, why, so much the better this cold day." It was not a lively joke, and they knew his pocket was very dirty. Indeed, the little girls had seen him stuff a dead rat into it only the day before. They looked ready to cry, but there was no help for them, except going back and complaining to their mother, and they did not like to do that. Besides, they knew that though Gardner was cross, he was trustworthy, and she would never let them go down to the lake without him. So they followed him, trying to be as good as they could, though it was difficult work. One of them proposed pelting him with snowballs as they pelted each other, but at the first, which fell in his neck, he turned round so furiously that they never sent a second, but walked behind him as meek as mice. As they went, they heard little steps pattering after them. "Perhaps it is the Brownie coming to play with us. I wish he would," whispered the youngest girl to the eldest boy, whose hand she generally held. And then the little pattering steps sounded again, travelling through the snow, but they saw nobody, so they said nothing. The children would have liked to go straight to the ice, but Gardner insisted on taking them a mile round to look at an extraordinary animal which a farmer there had just got, sent by his brother in Australia. The two old men stood gossiping so long that the children wearied extremely. Every minute seemed an hour till they got on the ice. At last one of them pulled Gardner's coat-tails and whispered that they were quite ready to go. "Then I'm not." And he waited ever so much longer, and got a drink of hot cider, which made him quite lively for a little while. But by the time they reached the lake he was as cross as ever. He struck the ice with his stick, but made no attempt to see if it really did bear, though he would not allow the children to go one step upon it till he had tried. "I know it doesn't bear, and you'll just have to go home again. Good thing, too, saves me from losing a day's work." "Try, only try. Bill said it bore," implored the boys, and looked wistfully at the two beautiful slides, just as Bill said, one up and one down, stretching all across the lake. "Of course it bears, or Bill could not have made these slides." "Bill's an ass," said the gardener, and put his heavy foot cautiously on the ice. Just then there was seen jumping across it a creature which certainly had never been seen on ice before. It made the most extraordinary bounds on its long hind legs, with its little forelegs tucked up in front of it as if it wanted to carry a muff, and its long stiff tail sticking out straight behind to balance itself with, apparently. The children at first started with surprise, and then burst out laughing, for it was the funniest creature, and had the funniest way of getting along that they had ever seen in their lives. "It's the kangaroo!" cried Gardner in great excitement. "It has got loose, and it's sure to be lost, and what a way Mr. Giles will be in! I must go and tell him. Or stop, I'll try and catch it." But in vain. It darted once or twice across the ice, dodging him, as it were, and once coming so close that he nearly caught it by the tail, to the children's great delight. Then it vanished entirely. "I must go and tell Mr. Giles directly," said Gardner, and then stopped, for he had promised not to leave the children, and it was such a wild goose chase after an escaped kangaroo. But he might get half-a-crown as a reward, and he was sure of another glass of cider. "You just stop quiet here, and I'll be back in 5 minutes," said he to the children. "You may go a little way on the ice, I think it's sound enough. Only mind you don't tumble in, for there'll be nobody to pull you out." "Oh, no," said the children, clapping their hands. They did not care for tumbling in, and were quite glad there was nobody there to pull them out. They hoped Gardner would stop a very long time away, only, as someone suggested when he was seen hurrying across the snowy field, he had taken away their lunch in his pocket too. "Never mind, we're not hungry yet. Now for a slide." Off they darted, the 3 elder boys, with a good run. The biggest of the girls followed after them, and soon the whole 4 were skimming one after the other, as fast as a railway train, across the slippery ice. And like a railway train they had a collision, and all came tumbling one over the other, with great screaming and laughter, to the high bank on the other side. The 2 younger ones stood mournfully watching the others from the opposite bank, when there stood beside them a small brown man. "Ho, ho, little people," said he, coming between them and taking hold of a hand of each. His was so warm and theirs so cold that it was quite comfortable. And then somehow they found in their open mouths a nice lozenge, I think it was peppermint, but I'm not sure, which comforted them still more. "Did you want me to play with you?" cried the Brownie. "Then here I am. What shall we do? Have a turn on the ice together?" No sooner said than done. The 2 little children felt themselves floating along, it was more like floating than running, with Brownie between them, up the lake and down the lake, and across the lake, not at all interfering with the sliders. Indeed, it was a great deal better than sliding. Rosy and breathless, their toes so nice and warm, and their hands feeling like mince pies just taken out of the oven, the little ones came to a standstill. The elder ones stopped their sliding and looked towards Brownie with entreating eyes. He swung himself up to a willow bough and then turned head over heels onto the ice. "Hello, you don't mean to say you big ones want to race too? Well, come along, if the 2 eldest will give a slide to the little ones." He watched them take a tiny sister between them and slide her up one side and down another, screaming with delight. Then he took the 2 middle children in either hand. 1, 2, 3, and away! Off they started, scudding along as light as feathers and as fast as steam engines over the smooth black ice, so clear that they could see the bits of stick and water grasses frozen in it, and even the little fishes swimming far down below, if they had only looked long enough. When all had had their fair turns, they began to be frightfully hungry. "Catch a fish for dinner, and I'll lend you a hook," said Brownie, at which they all laughed and then looked rather grave. Pulling a cold, raw, live fish from under the ice and eating it was not a pleasant idea of dinner. "Well, what would you like to have? Let the little one choose." She said, after thinking a minute, that she should like a currant cake. And I'd give you all a bit of it, a very large bit, I would indeed," added she, almost with the tears in her eyes, she was so very hungry. "Do it then," said the Brownie, in his little squeaking voice.